Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support, so get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Old Soul Bees, a family operation that promotes sustainability and is highly engaged in protecting the environment. And they do that by implementing good, clean, organic farming practices, permaculture, profitable habitat restoration, and integrated pest control, along with other innovative farming practices. But that's not all. They got some awesome honey, too. And if you're a beekeeper, well, then check this out. You can order queen bees, nuke colonies. Hell, they'll even help you pollinate your crops. OldSoulBees.com. Check them out. And thanks to Old Soul for supporting the Mead House 2020 Iron Bee. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode number 172. Hey, I was just tuning up the riding lawnmower when Jeff and Ryan showed up. I'm JD Webb, and I'll probably have to paint the garage after they leave. But hey, does anybody know where they can listen to the Mead House podcast? How about on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeart Radio, YouTube? Oh my God, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And pretty soon, you'll be able to catch the podcast on Amazon Music. Hey, check the front page of the website for more locations. In this episode, we started something unusual. It hasn't been done before and provokes people's minds to ponder endlessly, or at least until they get to the point where they have to get something into the fermenter in order to get their entry to the Iron Bee competition. Adam Thomas joins us tonight. He did just that and came out with a second place medal in the secret ingredient category. And in segment 2, I don't know about you, but piments have been kind of a thing here lately, and we got our resident piment maker, Ryan. We're going to dig into that just a little bit. We'll talk about juices, what's good, what's not, what works, what doesn't. Cabernets, Petit Syrah, Chardonnay, Riesling. I mean, it's your choice out there. And we'll talk about some tannins, some oaking, some yeast selections. We'll try to get into this thing as deep as we can get. And then, of course, in segment 3, Facebook friends. This is where we try to answer questions from mead makers like you and me, but no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house. All that and more here at the Mead House. But hey, thanks to all the Mead House key holders like Rick Joria, who joined recently in helping to keep the Mead House podcast free. You too can become a Mead House key holder and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We got some great thank you gifts to send out to you. Get on over to patreon.com, search for the Mead House, or just click on the link in the show notes. What are we drinking here tonight, guys? I usually start this part out two-fisting it in Mead House tradition. Got two kind of special glasses here. I'll tell you about the bourbon I'm drinking right now. Now this is like a no-brainer. If you want to oak something or do a little bourbon kind of infusion thing in your mead, say you got maybe a semi-sweet that you want a little bourbon-esque built into it a little bit. You're not going to believe this, all right? This is like bottom shelf bourbon, all right? This is Jim Beam double oaked, okay? It's like $19, if that. I tell you, you really, I get surprised sometimes, when you go out and spend money on liquor. Wine probably fits into this category as well. I spent a lot of money on really expensive bourbons and tequilas and what have you. But I found that some of the ones that I like the most are like under $30. I mean, it's ridiculous. Jim Beam double oaked, twice barreled. If you're looking to, now, here's what I would do. Okay, I wouldn't get serious about dropping wood in this thing for like weeks on end. You just want to get the wood wet, okay, and drop it into your secondary. All right, and then pour a little bit of this Jim Beam double oaked in there. Here's the deal: this Jim Beam, it's sweet up front, so we know it's a lot more than the 51% corn in the mash bill to bring that sweetness out. But it's got a really nice oaky flavor to it. Light caramels up front. The vanillins kind of hit you about mid palate, a little bit late. It's very smooth at about 80 proof, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I can't even see with my glasses on, but I believe it's an 80 proof bourbon. Very smooth. And this is what I would use if I wanted to, get a little bourbon flavor out of a mead project I was working on. I would use that bourbon, no question. So that's in the one fist. In the other, Sap House again. In my box, Jeff, you got your box too. I got 2 bottles of this Power of Love. Let me tell you something. If I check at the Sap House website, saphousemeadery.com, if they've even got any of this stuff left. This is this is a mead that was aged in apple brandy barrels for 2 years. This stuff will knock your socks off. I mean, just unbelievable. The aroma, green apples, like right in your nose. I mean, it's like in your face. And the honey character, the honey aroma comes in kind of second to the apple. Mm. Oh my God! This is for people who like cognacs and brandies and sherries as an after dinner. Put this on the shelf too. This makes an outstanding, nice little, 3-4 ounce pour after a nice dinner. I mean, this stuff is just absolutely amazing. And this is Power of Love by Sap House, Ash Fishbein, Evan Henderson, and the boys down there at Sap House over there in New Hampshire. Let me tell you, this is outstanding. So check them out, saphousemeadery.com. If they've got any left, you better order it now because this stuff doesn't last very long. And once it's gone, it's gone. So that's what I'm doing here tonight, boys. So Jeff, you always have something either. Well, I wouldn't call it simple, but you got something easy sometimes. Something simple, but sometimes you kind of go off the deep end. You got something really wild. What is it tonight?
Tonight I got a little bit of both, actually. It is still summertime, but it is getting darn close to fall. And one of what is fast becoming my favorite parts of fall is dirt cheap cases of Oktoberfest beer at Costco. Like last year, they had one particular brand that I was really enjoying. I grabbed a couple of cases of that over the course of the fall, and nothing better than just a good beer you're paying maybe $1 a bottle for. This year, last time I went to Costco, I noticed they had 3 different brands, all for about $26 a case.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, I was all over that.
Outstanding.
This is a Paul Anner Oktoberfest style Marzen. It's not exactly hoppy, but it's a little less malty sweet than I'm used to from an Oktoberfest, which is not bad. It's a little bit more crisp and a little bit more. I get more of that like bready, crackery kind of a flavor to the malt, which is kind of nice. I'm generally not a sweet kind of beer drinker. This is maybe a little bit more up my alley than the stuff I was drinking last year. Anyhow, in the other glass, I got brave again and broke into the little 6-pack of leftovers from Sooter's Flame last year that Ryan had gifted me here, and I've got a raspberry chipotle.
Oh, that sounds good.
Now, bear in mind, this is a year old. The chipotle is not really coming through particularly hot, which is great. It really just leaves a little bit of a tingle on the tongue. The raspberry is coming through really, really nicely, though. It's kind of got it's that right balance of fruity and tart. I've had a bunch of raspberry meats where it's like 100% tart.
Yeah.
Not a lot of fruitiness to it, but I get a lot of the raspberry flavor in this. It's probably medium sweet, and the chipotle comes through a little bit. There's a little bit of tingle on the tongue, like especially right after I swallow. I get a little bit of a vegetal flavor that might be from the pepper. It might be from long aging. I'm not sure which, but overall, yeah, I think I'll still enjoy this.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Let's check in with Ryan and see what he's got in his cup. Now, look, he's got a brand new baby at home, so I just wonder if the wheels are turning and he's figuring out a way to make a mead out of some baby formula. But Ryan, what did you put in your glass tonight? That's Ryan.
Yeah, so the baby, the little Quattro, as we're calling her.
Quattro.
The little mead maker number 4 was born last weekend, and things are going well at home. Mother and baby are doing well, and siblings are happy to help out and excited for the addition to the family.
Good deal.
So that's going well. I also last week, before she was born, judged the Valkyrie's horn.
Mm-hmm.
So this was virtual judging. I don't know how to distance judging, physically distance judging, I guess. And so I was connected to another judge via Zoom or Skype or something, and we were judging the same bottles. We each had the same bottles, and we were judging that way. And it actually worked really, really well. I thought it went great. But I ended up, but one of the really positive things of judging like that, this virtual distance judging, is that I had a bunch of bottles at my house. So it's not, you're judging in person, you and another judge, you're sitting across the table from each other, and you open one bottle and you pour a little bit out, and maybe you recap it. Most of that stuff, by the time the night's over, just goes down the drain. Well, when I had these bottles, and I only needed a little bit for me, so there was quite a bit left in them, and I recapped them. So I recapped all the bottles, and then I put them in the fridge, and I was a few of them made their way into my infinity bottle. So I've got a fresh round of meads in the infinity bottle, which is going really nicely here. So I'm drinking that with some seltzer water, and there's a lot of Saks strength stuff, so it's pretty heavy, but very good stuff. So I'm drinking a infinity mead that's been reinforced here with some of the first round Valkyrie's horn meads as well. So a nice, very nice drink for tonight.
Sounds good. Very good.
Yeah. So our guest tonight, who was our guest tonight? No, I'm just kidding. Adam Toms, who
was our guest
at the top of the show, joins us. We're coming back to some of the Iron Bee 2020 winners. Adam Toms took the silver medal in the secret ingredient contest with his mead Rose Buried in Chocolate. I heard about this one when Jeff was telling me about it. Adam has been a home mead maker. Started off home brewing a few years ago and really found his ideal hobby and addiction. As I think we've all gone down that road.
Yeah.
After pitching the yeast on his first batch of mead in January of 2019. So about a year and a half, or more than a year and a half, year and 3/4 into his mead making career. Lived by the idea that there are many ways to make a mead, and I'm not afraid to fail forward and experiment. Well, good for you. I'm glad you're out there trying things on your own and experimenting and all of that. Jeff tasted your mead, your Rose Buried in Chocolate, and his tasting notes were that it was very strong, really fresh strawberries, emphasizing fresh strawberries, which played nicely with the citrusy elements of the rose hips, almost a cotton candy-like sweetness that he thinks was from the Meridian cocoa nibs that we were giving out as Patreon rewards. He says he definitely wants to ask you about how you handled the strawberry and your approach to adding the cacao or cocoa back sweetening and carbonating. Well, he's going to get a chance here to do just that. Welcome to the show, Adam. Congratulations on your medal. And what's in your cup tonight?
Gentlemen, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. And in traditional mead house fashion, I'm also double fisting it tonight.
There you go. You're paying attention. You're paying attention, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you fine folks. So
there you
I'm
go.
doing it the right way. That's right. The first one I got here is actually it's a really good bottle. It's from Misbehaving Meads. It's Same Old Jam. It's a raspberry, marshmallow, and coconut mead that's been aged in an imperial stout barrel for about 9 months. And
oh wow, wow.
As you drink this, I mean, it's definitely jammy. Tons of fruit notes, really tons of raspberry. You get the barrel and you get the oak in there. And it finishes really nice on the tongue. Just really, really good mead. This is the second bottle I've had of this, so I'm not going to lie to you. It's one I really, really enjoy. It's a good mead. My wife likes it as well.
Wow.
So I'm sure it'll go fast. And my second hand, I actually have a session mead that I actually planned to take on a camping trip with me, and it just never finished in time. You can't rush them sometimes. And this mead is more of a berry-style pie mead. It was just a bunch of berries that I had in the freezer that I threw in and just made it a session mead, finished it off with some vanilla beans, some Vietnamese cinnamon, and some graham crackers I actually threw in there. And it's actually, as I taste it now, it's definitely come together. It's got a little better. It's lightly carbonated, so you get a nice fizz to it. Just really, really tasty. I'm really enjoying this one now. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Boy, both of those sound really good.
Well, thanks for joining. I'm gonna turn it over to Jeff here in just a minute, since he's the one who tasted your Rose Buried in Chocolate medal-winning mead. But tell us first of all, what did you think about was this your first time in the Iron V, or were you also in the Iron V in 2019?
No, this was the first opportunity I actually had to enter a competition. And I was, to be honest, I actually reached out to you folks because I was a little like, I don't know if I should do this. I hesitated because I haven't been a mead maker for very long. I made a lot of mead. That's the one thing I do is I make a lot of mead, and I have friends and family who try it. It's always good to hear their opinion, but never like getting the opinion of somebody who's really tasted a lot of mead. Most of the people who try my mead are like, oh, I didn't know that's what mead tasted like. And well, that's because you really haven't had mead, so you don't know what it tastes like. So it could be a difficult battle. So it was just a really good opportunity to enter my first competition and get solid feedback. And no doubt about it, when I heard the results, I was a little surprised because I was super excited about what happened. But being only a year and a half under my belt of making mead, it was a good feeling to know I'm headed in the right direction. So Yeah, it was fabulous.
You're not alone in that, Adam. We've talked to plenty of people on this show who have not been making mead for very long, who have produced some outstanding meads. So, no, you fit right in, dude. You're right there.
Absolutely. It's a lot of people hesitate, I think, like you do, in entering competitions, and we've had a lot of first time competition entrants into the Iron B the last 2 years, because we say, it's also about having your meads judged and just getting really good feedback from some really good judges that can help you understand it, and that's what we tell folks. You don't necessarily have to wait to enter a competition until you think that you're going to win. I don't think this is going to win the gold medal. Well, that's okay. You still get some really, really solid feedback, and you never know. It's like in your case, you can walk away with a medal. What do you think of playing with rose hips as the ingredient? Had you ever used them before? Or was this a new ingredient for you?
It was definitely a new ingredient for me, but out of all the ingredients, for some reason, I wanted something with rose in it, and I don't know if it was just meant to be. But I'm a big craft beer guy, and I recently drank a beer that had I guess there were rose. I don't know if it was a rose water in it. It was more like but it was rose with chocolate and strawberry, and it finished very nicely, and I loved the way it tasted in the beer. So as I got the ingredient, I thought to myself, how can I make something summery, something fresh, and something refreshing like that? Something that you could just, quite honestly, drink when it's nice and warm outside and really, really enjoy it. I was happy with the rose hips, but never worked with it before ever.
How did you wind up incorporating them into your mead?
So what I ended up doing is, because I have a slight addiction with making mead, I immediately had like 4 different ideas that I wanted to work with. And the first one was the one I ended up going with and obviously sending in. And it was the only one that I ended up not making a tea out of with the rose hips. I actually, I actually just ended up taking the strawberries right up front. It was about a 3-gallon batch, so I used quite a bit of strawberries, maybe 25 pounds of berries or so.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very forward. And I put, I would say about maybe 1.5 ounces of rose hips right in and fermented it with the berries. I ended up using meadow foam honey because I wanted to get something very candy-ish, and I think that's what maybe brought that cotton candy together with the cocoa nibs. But
there you go.
But with the berries, yeah, it was with about 1.5 ounces of rose hips up front. Once it was done fermenting, I was getting some of the rose hip, but not enough. So I ended up putting about another 1 ounce in the secondary with cocoa nibs and vanilla beans. And a tad bit of hibiscus I put in there to give it a nice little bit of color. And it ended up, you could taste it a little bit, but I got nice acid from it. I felt like from the rose hips and having the hibiscus in there. And I didn't need to add any acid at all in the end because I felt like it was balanced nicely. But it was definitely in primary and in secondary, but more like a dry hop style as opposed to a tea method, which I did try a tea method with 3 other meads that I didn't send in, but I was really deciding like which one should I send in, and this is the one I went with. So I'm happy I went with the strawberry one.
Jeff's over there chewing on his microphone, Ryan, but I wanted to say this. I know, so often we talk to people and, we ask them how they incorporate different ingredients. Usually when it comes to spices, herbs, botanicals, that kind of thing, it's always a tea. And here Adam does something not so much different than anybody else, but something that we haven't really heard from too much from folks who work with these kinds of ingredients. So I'm glad to hear that he did something different. That was for Ryan. Ryan must be changing a diaper.
Sorry, JD. One more time on that one.
That's all right. What I said was that usually when we talk to a lot of folks that use botanicals and spices and herbs, it's always about making a tea of one kind or another, and using the water to as the flavoring component of that particular spice or herb or botanical, whatever it is. I'm glad to see that Adam, chose to do something not so, I guess, different than what we're typically, what we hear from most of the folks out there. Using it right in the fermenter rather than making going and making a big tea out of it or whatever. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've done that as well. When I was starting out as a mead maker, I would drop in the herbs and spices and that kind of thing when I'd use them, and then I moved into teas and tinctures.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was doing the teas and the tinctures was usually twofold, or primarily twofold. In that, number one, it gave me more control. I could add over the tea or the tincture until I got the flavor that I wanted. And then number two, it's cleaner. If I'm adding a hibiscus tea or adding some sort of an exotic wood tincture, or root, I should say. I didn't have to worry about any displacement or any sediment or anything that was going to cause the clarity issues in the meat or racking issues or anything like that. So yes, I'd say that, just like Adam said in his bio, that there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and you just play around to find out what works best for you, what gives you the best flavor. And you know what? There might be something different. If you make a pink peppercorn tincture or you just dry hop pink peppercorns,
mm-hmm.
It's possible those things are going to give you different flavors, and one you may prefer over the other.
Sure.
So I got no problem with people doing different things and figuring out what they like the best.
Yeah. Jeff, I know you're chewing on the microphone over there wanting to get over here to Adam. So it's your turn, and we'll just sit back and be quiet.
Sure. So the thing that really stood out, now there were, I think, about 3 different meads that had strawberry as the fruit flavor to contrast against the rose hips. And the one that really stood out for me, the factor that really made yours shine, I think, was that this tasted more like a fresh strawberry as opposed to kind of a strawberry jammy flavor, if you follow. So I kind of wanted to ask, how do you approach adding the strawberries? I mean, you mentioned you had something like 25 pounds in a 3-gallon batch, that's more than I put in a 5-gallon batch, frankly. How long was your contact time on that? Tell us about using the strawberries.
So I took the strawberries right up front. I would say half of them were fresh that I cut up and froze. The other half were frozen strawberries just because of what I had in my hands. But I basically took the strawberries, let them sit in a bucket overnight with a little bit of enzyme, let it sit there to break down. And then the next day, added my water and my honey and all my other goodies and kind of got it going and made a really, I always make a nice starter, got my starter going. I did a lot of, the real big to me, what I've been doing a lot of, which I think we all should do, right, which I've learned from you and everybody else, is making sure you're using the appropriate yeast. And I did a lot of research on what I wanted to use for yeast, and I wanted to do something that would bring out a berry note even in the smell. So I am all about sharing, and I ended up using Rowan 4600, which I really, really liked with the strawberry. I've made a few different strawberry batches before. And out of all of them, this is the one that I got the most out of. Just, you put it up to your nose and you just smell that. Again, not the jammy berry, but that fresh, but that bouquet, that strawberry. And I don't know if that's what helped it, was the yeast selection. It fermented dry relatively quick. I fermented at a lower temperature being in Wisconsin. I'm lucky to have a basement where I can throw it on the floor and the temperature control kind of helps me out. So it stayed, I would say, in the mid 60s probably. So it stayed relatively lower, not too high. I would say maybe less than 2 weeks. It was fermented dry. I ended up putting most of what I do with a lot of my sessions is I generally don't stagger. I dump a lot of nutrients right up front, just depending upon how hot I'm fermenting or how cold I am, I guess. But so that's how I worked this one, and I was very, very happy. I didn't put any berries in the secondary by any means. It was all up front. And it gave me the note that I wanted. It gave me the strawberry flavor. I felt like if I added more in the secondary, it would have overwhelmed the rose hips, and I wouldn't have caught anything. And I think I wouldn't have caught any of the metal foam in there as well, because that's where I was catching cotton candy from. I know it was hard to catch some of the honey in there, but I think the metal foam blended in there really nicely. So,
yeah, the metal foam was a nice touch. It had the cotton candy note that I remember we went back and forth as to where that was coming from, whether that was like a back sweetened with metal foam or what have you. But we also had a couple entries in the brag category that used the same cacao nibs. I think the same cacao nibs. I don't know if you used the Meridian Hive that we were giving away for Patreon rewards or not.
I did. I used exactly. I definitely used those. Yep. I took advantage of what you sent me. I'm like, I'm going to use these great ingredients. So.
Yeah, we. So you used those in secondary. You mentioned. How much did you put in?
I put about a half ounce per gram. So I put about, I'd probably say an ounce and a half to maybe 2 ounces of nibs in a secondary. I usually stick around a half ounce of, and then about, I think I put 4 vanilla beans in there just to bring out the chocolate with it as well.
Did you do anything to the cacao nibs at all? Roast them, crack them open, or grind them up or anything? Did you prep them at all?
When I looked at them, because they felt like they were so grinded up already, I just threw them straight in the primary. In the secondary, I did throw them in a bag when I put them in, I just made a little tea bag out of it and just kind of threw it in there with the nibs and everything else. The nibs I didn't bag, but I definitely bagged the rose hips because I was worried about filtering them afterwards, just because they were pretty small. They were nice. They were nice rose hips.
I don't remember, Jeff, if these Meridian nibs were already pre-roasted, or I don't remember. I used mine already.
Yeah, they're fairly dark. I'm pretty sure they were pre-roasted. Mm-hmm. They look like they've also been kind of rough chopped. They have I would say, I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch size.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff.
So what was your contact time with the chocolate and the vanilla? Was it fairly short? Did you hold it in there for a while?
I would.
How did you approach it?
Let's see. For the nibs, the rose hips, I ended up keeping them all in at the same time because I wanted to avoid racking too many times. So I would say I probably had let me look at my notes here. I think 1 second. So in the secondary, about 2.5 weeks, I racked it after it was on the rose hips, the nibs, and the vanilla beans. So about 2.5 weeks.
Right on. Okay.
So it's a little bit, depending upon how long it is. I just got the flavor I wanted at that time, and I racked it off, and it was a little bit. At that time, I felt like it was a little sweet, but then I knew I was going to lose some of that sweetness once I carved it, and I got a little bit of carbonation out of it. So once I had it carved, I'm like, this is exactly where I need to stop. Sometimes I like to overthink it and add too much, and I had to stop right there. So
yeah, that was a good instinct on your part.
This guy talks like he's been making mead for like 20 years. You sure you only been making mead for a year and a half?
Jake, I think it all boils down to just, once I started making mead, it's just reading the amount of information, not really even in books, just the amount of information on the Facebook groups and the different groups that you can be involved with. If you really dig in there and read, fabulous mead makers, giving away secrets, and they're not afraid to share. And I've learned so much from everybody, and that's what I owe it to. I mean, this year alone, September, I think I'm about 22 batches down my belt for the year. So I just keep on going and going. I can't stop making this stuff, and it's taken over. And I think I'm just appreciative that my family allows me to decorate my house with carboys and fermenters. So,
Been there, done that.
right? I'm sure we all have, right?
Yeah, now it's kegs and kegerators.
Yeah, and that's the problem too. The kegs are on their way now too. So I guess I need to put the foot on the brake, but it feels like it's on the gas pedal. So
well, you can talk to Ryan about using glass carboys. Listening to him is the reason why I switched to all kegs. So, I want to ask you, Adam. A year and a half. What got you started down this mead making journey, anyway?
Started off as a home brewer, so I was making beer at home, and getting beer kits, starting it off like anybody should, just making sure you're doing it the right way, and
sure.
I just going across some of the Facebook groups, caught a recipe for mead, and I'm like, I'm gonna make some mead, and I'm not going to lie, that first batch wasn't as tasty as it should have been, even though I thought it probably was at the time. I definitely rushed it and did some things I shouldn't have. But then I had the opportunity to have some good mead by going to like beer festivals and trying mead, and then understanding, wow, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. And the problem with Milwaukee is it's a big beer scene, but there's not a ton of mead around here. So you go south a little bit, and I'm really close to the sugar belt, so you can get the great meaderies that are down there that I love. Manic is one of my favorites that I love. I just love the big sugary sweet meads that are. They're delicious. So, I mean, it's, I think it's part of it is just starting to drink a lot of the mead, and then telling my wife that if I start making this mead, I won't have to buy it anymore.
I know you're right.
But now I seem like I'm buying much more than I ever have.
Yeah.
And I feel like in order to make good mead, you have to drink good mead. So otherwise, how do you know if you're making good mead or not, right? So I don't know if I'm ever going to fulfill that promise. So
that sounds like this. That sounds like the same excuse we've all told our wives. Well, gee, honey, if I started making it, right, Ryan?
Yeah, that was the plan.
I'll tell you, you've come a long ways, Adam. I mean, to score a second place medal in the Iron B. I know these judges. I mean, I know these guys. I mean, they can be pretty tough. So I just wish I was able to taste. It. I wasn't up there, and of course, with this whole COVID thing, we never would have been able to put it all under one roof anyway. But and I sure miss that. I thoroughly enjoyed the first year of 2019 when we were up there in Minnesota and St. Paul. And I tell you, what a time. I mean, it was just incredible. I could not believe the camaraderie and the community that these guys represent. I mean, you're in good hands, when it comes to the mead community, because these guys are going to take care of you. And here's the reason why I think that, okay? Unlike the wine industry, mead making is still, although it's thousands of years old, it's still new. I mean, it's like it just started 2 weeks ago. Winemaking has been here for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and people have capitalized on it. Now it's a huge industry. Mead making still isn't. There's so far fewer meaderies out there, obviously, than there are wineries, and far fewer bottles of mead on the shelf than there are wines. I mean, I go to my local liquor store that does stock mead, and you might get 6 bottles of mead there, but there's 5,000 bottles of wine. So we got a long ways to go, but it's guys like you and a lot of these other home mead makers that keep people like Ash Fishbein at Sap House that I mentioned at the top of the show. It's what keeps these guys on their toes. That's how these guys started. So things that you're doing at home, it's all about inspiring others as well, and that's what this show is all about. We don't profess to be professional mead makers. Hell, I know less than Ryan does, and probably even more less than what Jeff knows. But I get by. I like what I like what I make. I drink what I make, and that's what's important to me. So, I don't want to go into a long old dissertation about the whole thing, but congratulations. I mean, it's an awesome thing you're doing, And I just wish I had a bottle of that mead to drink right here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I honestly wish I had more left. I think I got maybe 2 bottles sitting down in the cellar that I'm going to hold on to for a little bit. But otherwise, I think it's time for a new batch of that one to come up now.
Yeah, save them. Special occasion. Those always come up. Something to celebrate, and crack the bottles open if you have to. But what an awesome job. Ryan, throw it back over to you.
Yeah, Adam, great job. Again, it's been really great to hear hear your approach and what you're doing and how you're doing it. All the best of luck to you, and keep us in the loop here. We'd love to know what you're working on, what you're coming up with, what you're trying out, and we'll have to have you back to give us an update here soon.
Yeah, I would love to join you again. I appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for having me tonight.
Hey, you know what? It's our pleasure. And like Ryan said, please come back. Keep tabs. You got our Facebook deal. Let us know what you're doing. We're interested in talking to people like you, home mead makers who get inspired to put these kind of projects together and find out what you're all about and what your project is all about. So thanks for joining us tonight, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Have a great one, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Adam.
Wow. I don't know if you guys caught that one little deal, quote, "can't rush them," right at the top when he first started. I had to write that down. Can't rush them. I mean, you're working on a good project. You want it to turn out good. Don't rush it. Don't rush it into the bottle thinking you're going to drink it in 2 days. After you put the yeast in the fermenter. I mean, it's just, I kind of like that.
And it's such an important lesson for novice mead makers to learn that, you just kind of got to let things go the way they're going to go. You can't force the yeast to do their thing. You can't force the flavors to meld. Sometimes you just got to let it sit and be patient. And, time can be the best ingredient you put into a mead.
Well, yeah, Ryan. I mean, this guy's all about what our show's all about.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. Ryan must be heating up bottles in the kitchen.
No, I mean you said it. There's nothing more I need
nothing
to
more
say.
To add, yeah. Well, once again,
we
Adam,
say that we are, we are home mead makers, and we put on the show for the home mead maker, and that's exactly what Adam is.
There you go. And again, Adam, thanks for joining us tonight. Hey, yeah, before we get to the second segment, let me do this first. Hey, how many times has your dad told you as a kid, if you're going to do something, do it right? I heard that 1,000 times. That's exactly the philosophy of Imperial Yeast. Or that's exactly, let me start that again. How many times has your dad told you as a kid, if you're going to do something, do it right? I heard that 1,000 times. That is exactly the philosophy Imperial Yeast started out with, and decades of investment in liquid yeast and brewing. Imperial Yeast is here to provide you with the best yeast, best customer service, and best technical support available, as stated on their website. A motley crew of sci-fi geeks, cyclists, D&D nerds, gardeners, and rock-obsessed weirdos. They're united by their own keen interest in the craft beer industry. And so if you're a home brewer like the rest of us, seriously, you got to check these guys out. Get on over to their website, imperialyeast.com. Check out their yeast strains. Find the one you like. And then go to your local home brew shop and make sure that they get the Imperial Yeast in their store. And thanks, guys, at Imperial Yeast for supporting the Mead House 2020 Iron B. Second segment, guys. Jeff came up with this harebrained idea when we were texting back and forth on the show notes. And he said Pymonts, and I kind of wrote down the harmonious blend of grapes. Of course, I have no idea, Jeff, what it really says. I just came up with, the whole beer thing. But the harmonious blend of grape juice and, well, honey, I guess. So, but what kind of grape juice? Fresh juice, frozen juice, kit juice, what? I mean, Cabernet, Petit Syrah, Chardonnay, Riesling. I mean, it just runs the whole. I mean, go to a liquor store, look at the wine rack, okay? Look at the wine shelves, and just pick one. There's plenty of choices out there that can lead to lots of ideas. So, Ryan, I know, you've done some pretty phenomenal Pymonts in the past using a number of different grape juices. What was your favorite?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What was my favorite? Well, I guess to drink or to make, a couple different ways to look at that. One of them that I did. So, okay, if you're making a Pymont, most people will essentially think of like a wine, like you're thinking, right? Like a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Riesling. One of the really great Pymonts I had was a Gewürztraminer Pymont, Gewürztraminer and orange blossom honey made by Chris Smith when he was at Northern Brewer, and that was a medal winning Pymont. It was fantastic, and he was pouring it at HomebrewCon one year, so I got to taste it there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and he was actually, if you go back, I think I got a little clip of him talking about it when I was doing interviews at HomebrewCon. Anyway, so a lot of people think that. They think they get the juice of that. And the three different ways that you can get the juice are you can get that it's fresh, so you're one of two different ways. So you're buying a pail of pressed juice. You see those a lot at different wine clubs or homebrew shops where they'll say, "Oh, we've got we've got wine juice coming in from California or South America or wherever," and it's a bucket of juice, and that. The second way is if you buy grapes. So there's a few different clubs they'll do a grape buy, and they'll have a truck come in California, and usually California, and you get your grapes. You get your, the whole thing, the Riesling grapes or the Pinot grapes or whatever they are. That's the first way. The second way is to buy a wine kit. You've seen these on the shelves at all the homebrew stores. That's comes in a bladder of concentrated wine juice. Some is more concentrated than others. Typically, the more expensive the wine kit, the less concentrated the juice is, so the bigger the box. And they all make the same volume. It's just that it's been less concentrated. And then the third way, if you're doing that, would be to buy like a can or just concentrated wine juice, like an Alexander's or something. And I've made Pymont with all of those. Wine kits, concentrated cans, and wine concentrate, I should say, and then fresh grapes. Well, one of my favorites to make was, I'm kind of going a different direction here, was a grappa style. So, and I say style, and I'm using the terms kind of fast and loose here, but grappa is an Italian, primarily Italian, I get my parts a little too, but primarily an Italian digestive for a liqueur, and kind of like brandy in a little bit of a way. And so in Italy, winemakers are required to sell their pomace or spent grapes to grappa makers. And so what they do is they, in the winemaking process, and first, you do the crush. So it's, everyone's seen, the barefoot, people in a barefoot and a big vat kind of stomping grapes. And this was the first thing. You do the crush, and then you've got the juice and the busted grapes. And a lot of red wines are fermented right like that. They're fermented on the skins. A lot of white wines are pressed right away, where after they crush them, they go through a press, and it's just, just the juice is what comes out, and then they're fermented. Rosés are sometimes partially fermented on the skins and then pressed off. Anyway, so after you've pressed and all you have left over is this pomace, essentially, of these, skins and that kind of thing, there's still sugar in those, and they will ferment. They'll continue to ferment. And so then what happens is these grappa makers, they ferment those up and they distill them. So then you've now got this distilled liqueur made from grape skins, essentially. So anyway, what I did is, I've mentioned a few times, my cousin's a winemaker. He buys fresh grapes, from California usually, and makes, traditional wines, or, even in Minnesota here, he does grapes. And so and he ferments on the skins most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So after he had pressed, I took the skins. I took all the skins and I put them in a fermenter, and then I filled it with water and added honey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of, like I said, kind of grappa style, even though it's not the way grappa is made.
Sure.
And made a really, really interesting piment, I'm calling it, just with those grape skins, just with all the grape skins. So we had a lot of, some good tannin and good color and that. And it was a little, it was something that was interesting, like in a cordial glass. You could really appreciate it, but I'd made like 5 gallons of it, and that would just last forever.
That's a lot of cordial glasses.
Yeah, if you're drinking it 3 ounces at a time or something. So I ended up blending it with another wine that I had made from a kit. So a piment that I made from wine kit. Mm-hmm. So I blended it with that, and that gave it some really, really great complexity. And I think I bought like 3 gallons of it. And then the next thing I did was I said, I kind of want to keep going with some, iterations of this. So then I threw a bag of frozen berries in it and let it, again, kind of re-ferment now with some frozen berries.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought was just really, again, gave some really interesting flavors, and it was really good, that kind of thing. And that's kind of where I want to come back to is if you go to some of the big homebrew stores, their websites, for example, they'll have different kinds of wine that they call, there's one of the brands, I think it's called Island Mist. And it's essentially grapes with other fruit. So they might say, oh, we've got a strawberry Riesling, or an apple Chardonnay, or, a kiwi Sauvignon Blanc, or something like that. So, now, again, if you're trying to be super pure and disciplined, what a piment is, once you add those other fruits, you're kind of getting into melomels. But, it's
still made with grape juice.
What you want to do and what you're interested in. So, yeah, I'd say that was the most fun to make, or one of them that I enjoyed, was kind of going through these 3 stages of making piment and ending up with kind of 3 distinct different piments that that were all very good. If you want to get into the specifics, wine juice or grape juice must has a lot of nutrients, has some good nutrients in it. I mean, you can always add a little more nutrients, but it's got a lot more than honey. It's got, I like fermenting on oak as well to get some complexity.
Yeah.
So I ferment it on oak, and then I typically will put more oak in when it's in secondary, and like doing like kind of layering oak. You got to do two different toasts or two different varieties of wood as well to kind of layer that on. But it's a fun one to do. You can, like I said, you can go really pure and say, oh, I want to make a Cabernet Sauvignon Pyment, and just try to do exactly the way a winemaker would treat a Cabernet Sauvignon and add honey. So you're just trying to add something different to it, but you're trying to do it as disciplined as possible. Or you can go the other way and say, I want to create a kiwi cherry Sauvignon with snowberry honey or something, and do that. And that's fine too. So again, it's you're only beholden to your own taste buds.
You're talking something similar to the two port wine meads. When I call them port wine, they kind of similar in nature. I mean, it's just high alcohol, but they're, I guess, for all intents and purposes, Jeff, they're still Pyments, right? Because I used grape juice. I used other things, but I did use grape juice and honey. And I don't know what BJCP requires of a Pyment, but I know the two things are the two things are grape juice and honey. So whatever else you add to it, I don't think they list. So those two port meads that I made, I mean, the blackberry cherry and the black currant projects that I did, kind of along the same lines, right?
Yeah. I think, realistically, if we're talking about those port projects, whether it's going to be a kind of a general melomel or a Pyment, to me feels like, well, does it drink more like a wine or does it drink like it's super fruity? There's, it depends on, I guess, the balance and complexity of the grapes you're using as a base versus the fruit that you've added in addition. If the fruit notes are kind of like a secondary flavor, and the Pyment is kind of the strongest, the dominant flavor, Pyment. I mean, if the fruit is very forward, and the grape is there, but it's kind of just one of several different flavors at play, maybe melomel. That's a bit subjective.
What about yeast selection, Ryan? I mean, we've been kind of hung up making braggots here for a long time, and I selectively use beer yeast for just about everything I do now. But I'm not sure I'd go that route with a Pyment. I'd probably stick with some sort of a wine yeast. So you stay with the recommendation, this yeast for white wines, that yeast for red wines type of thing?
Yeah, so I will get into that in 1 second. I'll say that the alcohol content, because you touched on yeast, you made me think of alcohol content. Wine must, so the grape berry juice is typically all that, pure winemakers, that's all they're doing. They're not adding anything, right? They're not taking anything away, or they're not adding anything. And they get, those most wines are going to be, a lot of times that you'll see, when you look at your wine bottles, that you get, 12%-ish. Some are a little higher, some are a little lower, but right around there. Now, when you're making a Pyment, you've got a couple of options. You can either use the grape berry juice as your only liquid, meaning that when you add honey, you are going to increase the alcohol potential. You're gonna raise that up and have a higher alcohol, higher ABV. Or the second thing you can do is you can lower the gravity of you can try to lower the gravity of the must by cutting it with water and then adding the honey in to get, if you want to maintain like that 12 or so percent ABV or wherever you want to be. So now with that being said, I mean, you got to think of where you're going to want to be. There, most wine yeasts are going to not have any problem, but like JD, when you went to your port mead, and you're trying to push those into the 20s,
Right.
You needed a yeast that could handle it. So again, I think there's two schools of thought here. If you want to make a Côte d'Aron, it's a gorgeous, Côte d'Aron Piment, you want to mimic that, then use a Côte d'Aron yeast. You can use the Côte d'Aron yeast. Or if you want to make a Pinot or a Chardonnay, you can use the yeasts that are most closely associated with that style. Mm-hmm. You can also go the other way again and try to be completely experimental. I mean, I made a Piment that you guys both had, and I made it with Kvike yeast. Mm-hmm. I thought, hey, I'd love to draw some of these flavors, these tropical flavors into the Piment. It was a rosé kind of Piment, and and I used the Kvike yeast to do that a little bit. So you're not encumbered by any means by saying I have to do this or I have to do that. You can really go hog wild and play with those that are going to be up. I mean, it's not going to throw the same esters, but I mean, if you wanted to make a Piment with a monastic beer yeast, you could try. I mean, you could absolutely try it out and see what you think, and go from there. So, just like Adam, I'll go back to that's like Adam was saying. He likes to try stuff out and fail forward, as he put it. Go out there and try. I mean, try to make a Kiwi Chardonnay, Piment with a Kvike yeast, or try to make a Marquette grape and mesquite honey Piment with a monastic, Belgian beer yeast.
So
you try it out, so you did it.
So I guess this comes from, I enjoy a nice glass of wine too, and I like both reds and whites. I mean, my favorite white is a Pinot Grigio. My favorite red is a Cabernet. And, each has its own mouthfeel type of thing going on. I mean, I like nicely oaked cab. So now we're getting into that tannin world. Where I guess there's choices to make there. Oaking in the fermenter, I've been there, done that. That doesn't produce a lot of oak flavor. That just gives you some complexity, like you said, some mouthfeel, maybe at that point. But what about some of these powdered tannins that we see out there? Are they a good substitute for oaking, or is that separate? Is oaking separate from introducing tannins?
Well, in my experience, the best way to get kind of a body and tannin and mouthfeel is grape skins. So if you've got fresh grapes and you've done your own crush, press, that's fantastic. If you're doing a wine kit, a lot of the high-end red wine kits come with skins. If you don't have access to skins, that's where you start trying to use other things to build up that structure.
Yeah.
No, I've never used the powdered tannin. but like the oak is also another a good way to do it. You can do that with oak or different types of woods. I mean, when we say oak, you might be using cedar or
Yeah.
hickory or whatever. There's a plethora of different types of wood sticks out there, that you can use, or chips and things like that. Um, but in my opinion, the best thing you could do is use grape skins to do that.
Yeah. When it comes to honey selection, Jeff, um, now we're talking something we're going to submit into judging or something or other. I mean, I'm not sure quite how to ask this question, but how would you? A lot of it's based on the selection process. I mean, what kind of honey goes with what, or how do you go through that whole selection process? And the honey has to have some component, right? I mean, there has to be some level of honey, whether it's aroma, some kind of character. I mean, otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah, if all the honey is adding is sugar to make alcohol, basically you're just making a fortified wine at the end of the day. Um, you, you're fortifying it with extra sugar up front. I think the term for that is chaptalizing or something like that.
Yeah.
Except honey instead of sugar. But and this is part of my quandary, just because I've not done a lot of piments in general. I've done a couple kits and added some honey to those. I think I did, one with a can concentrate, added a little honey to that. But now I'm getting an opportunity to play with some fresh juice, just because I'm going to go participate in a crush for my local homebrew store at the end of the month. And man, how do I want to approach that? So yeah, the long and short of it, I really think that when you're approaching this question and you're trying to decide what kind of honey to put into a piment, you've got to go for an added complexity. There is a level at which you definitely want flavors that are complementary, that play well together. So off the top of my head, something like a Riesling or Gewürztraminer with maybe orange blossom. The orange blossom would add a little bit of tartness to it, a little bit of that citrusy flavor that would pair really nicely, I would think.
Yeah.
But I'm not super experienced in this regard either. So, yeah, the two things that I would look for in just selecting a honey to go with it are, does it taste nice with the variety of grape you're using? And does it add complexity to it? Is there more than just, it's a strong wine when you taste it?
Yeah, I'm not looking. I mean, this is an interesting category. I mean, I've never, other than the two port mead projects that I did, never really worked with grape juice. So Ryan, I'm wondering, I mean, is there a particular list of honeys that you would choose to use, or I mean, is this pretty much run the gamut? I mean,
Well,
Adam used Metafoam in his rosehip thing. Is Metafoam cotton candy something you would want in a grape in a piment? I mean, I don't know. I guess there's a whole world out there, right?
yeah. Well, it depends what you like. I'll say it that way. I'd say that the things you want to be careful of are, yes, good honey and the way you use it make a difference. But, metal foam comes through a lot differently in a traditional than it does in a berry bomb.
Right. Yeah.
Or things like that. Or, Tupelo is one way in a traditional, but it's very different in a stout braggot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want to be careful in that, is the honey going to add? Is it going to really add to your final product? Or is it going to, for example, what's another pretty expensive honey out there? Snowberry, let's say that. Do you need to use snowberry is it going to really add something to your
Yeah.
Your Pinot Noir piment? Is it, and if it does, then you've got all the case for making it.
Right.
But if the Pinot is going to really overpower a lot of the honey nuances and subtleties, might be fine with just orange blossom or a white clover or something like that. So it's kind of up to the mead maker to decide what's going to work. I could see a meadow foam working very well in say a Chardonnay or something just off the top of my head. I could, at the same time, you might, I don't know, maybe you want a buckwheat in your Cabernet, and doing that at the, like I said, or at the same time, I could see, an orange blossom.
Yeah.
Or going well in just about any wine style.
Well, it
just depends again on how you're doing it.
Yeah, this is a subject we need to spend more time on. Of course, we spend a lot of time talking about braggas because that's what the three of us usually like to make. I know Jeff goes out on a whim sometimes and makes all kinds of different things. Ryan does too once in a while, but braggots is my favorite category. I mean, that's not to say that I won't drink other meads. How I'm drinking one tonight, just Power of Love by Saphouse, is just freaking amazing. This is what a barrel will do for you. A big barrel, not a little barrel, a big barrel. So I'm not opposed. I mean, I did those 2 port wine projects. I mean, they were intense. Trying to push a yeast up beyond 20%. I mean, I almost got there. And I think the biggest one was like 19.5. And that's saying something. And, but I love them both. I mean, they both, without a lot of the heat that you usually get with a port wine, there's not so much of that in these 2 projects, but man, they're good. Oh my God. So I'm happy with them, and that was basically Alexander's grape juice, and both of them combinations of different grape juices, and one had some blackberry puree, had some not frozen, dehydrated cherries. I don't remember the whole recipe without trying to dig out my notes and go back and look, but piment is something I would certainly be interested in doing. My wife likes nice sweet wines. Gewürztraminers would be up her alley. She loves some of the meads that we get from Saphouse in the box, and some of them have a sweet component to them. So I'd be interested in pursuing this piment thing a little bit further. That being said, let's move on to Facebook friends and Reddit friends. Of course, this is where we try to answer questions from mead makers with no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house. Let's start this one off the top. This is going to be a good one for both of you. Let's go with Jeff first. Can you bottle a stalled mead? I'm not certain if it's stalled or just hit yeast tolerance, but my mead made with Lalvin KV 1116 hit around 15%. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty damn close. And it has stopped fermenting despite back sweetening. I'm assuming I can just bottle it now, right? There's not much that would restart it accidentally and create a bomb. I don't have any stabilizers right now. I was considering pasteurizing. Oh, don't do that. I was considering pasteurizing just to be totally certain. Edit. I suppose I shouldn't call it back sweetening if it hasn't been stabilized first. Perhaps step feeding. This is one of my first meads, so my procedure wasn't as clean or standard as it should have been. A lot to unpack there, guys.
Yep.
Jeff, you're reading along with me. I know you are. So take a stab. Take first stab at it.
Okay. So the first part here is that we're assuming the UC sit tolerance KV 116 at 1116, 1116, at 15%, which is not correct. Yeast tolerance for that guy is 18%, and you can push it further pretty easily. I mean, 1116 is my go-to workhorse when I just want all the sugar gone. So I would strongly advise against just bottling it off. My preferred way to do this would just be to stabilize it. However we have to do it, as far as get stuff from Amazon, make that trip to your homebrew store. The potassium metabisulfite, potassium sorbate, not expensive. You're probably out $6 for the two of them, and yeah, just get it stabilized, then get it bottled up. If you're happy with the sweetness level with it, go for it. That said, don't play games with, the yeast stopped, so I think it's good to bottle. Always stabilize or pasteurize. I played with pasteurizing a little bit. I'm not 100% on it yet. I don't know that that's the appropriate way to handle stabilizing in every situation, but I kind of like where it's going with that. That said, one of my own horror stories, I made just a traditional wine on the sweet side for our wedding, which was pretty close to 5 years ago now. About 2 years ago, I was woken up one Sunday morning by a loud pop from my kitchen. And I'm a very light sleeper. I'm a little bit paranoid about being woken up in the early morning hours. I rush to my kitchen and find that just in the summer heat, one of these bottles left over from the wedding has burst its cork. That cork flew all the way across the kitchen, and it sputtered mead, like probably halfway into my kitchen floor from the top of my fridge. That mead had been sitting there for 3 years.
Jeez.
I would have put it well past bottle bomb stage at that point, but apparently not.
I love stories like this.
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah.
I've not had any further issues yet. And at that point, I kind of looked at that. I grabbed the mop and said, well, okay, we're stabilizing everything from here on out.
Yeah. I've also heard and read about horror stories about people pasteurizing, especially these home brewers that brew beer. And they make an attempt to pasteurize their beer bottles, in a pressure cooker, and then they, everything calms down, and they take the lid off, and there's a bunch of just broken glass and crap in the bottom of the pressure cooker. So don't pasteurize. I mean, you don't have to do that. Ryan,
I will say I've tried pasteurizing once. I use my sous vide as opposed to a pressure cooker.
There you go.
Just to get it right up to that 145 and let it hang out there for the requisite amount of time.
Yeah,
that's the way to do it if you're going to do it.
Yeah,
I'm still not convinced that doesn't affect flavor though.
Oh my God, yeah. I read stories over on, I think it's called homebrewtalk.com, the big forum over there for, mainly for beer brewers over there. Awesome forum. But I just read horror stories over there about guys trying to pasteurize and, take the cover off the pressure cooker and just broken glass all in the bottom of the pressure cooker. Anyway, Ryan, where is the
earlier today?
Go ahead.
I'm very sorry. Earlier today, I saw a video of a guy trying to pasteurize, I think it was beer, in just a pot of boiling water. He sticks 2 or 3 bottles in there, puts the lid on, and the video sits in silence for like 2 minutes before one of these caps, just a standard bottle cap, pops, and it literally knocks the lid like 2 feet up with this fountain of gushy beer.
Oh yeah, man, that's dangerous stuff.
Nope. Yep. Not the thing I want to do.
Ryan, in this whole thing here, he talks about it hitting around 50%. Jeff says this is a yeast that goes up to way beyond that. So at what point does the hydrometer come into play here?
Well, I mean, you got to know your gravity. You absolutely know what your original gravity was, know what your final gravity is, that kind of a thing. Absolutely. I'll say that when you're bottling, a standard beer bottle, not one of the really thick, heavy Belgian bottles, but just your standard, long neck bottle, homebrewer bottle. Those things can handle the pressure equivalent of maybe a 0.5% alcohol, and sometimes less, which is going to do. I'm trying to do this in a hydrometer style way, right? So, for example, if you've got, let's say it's at 15% alcohol, and you put it in a bottle, Crown Cap beer bottle, and it even ferments a little bit more, like up to 15.5%. At 15.5%, you are pushing the limits of now the carbon dioxide produced off of that 0.5% of the amount of the pressure volume that bottle can handle. So you don't have a ton of wiggle room here, right? Like when you bottle carbonate, I mean, you're producing a few tenths alcohol, by additional ABV in that bottle, but you don't have much. So I mean, if you're at 15 and that thing even goes up 1%, those bottles are going to crack. The bottles are going to crack. They're going to break. You're going to have a mess all over the place. If you've got a cork, they're going to blow the corks right off.
Yep.
They're going to shoot the corks out. So you got to be, like I said, Jeff was saying, the best thing you can do is stabilize it and go from there, and do that. And if you do, let's just say you do get you're using Crown Cap, and you get maybe that 0.5, 0.4 or 0.5% ABV, right around that threshold, what that bottle can handle. When you do open it, it's going to be like a champagne fountain. It's going to just shoot up in the air, and you're going to have, you're going to end up with what, half the bottle, on the ceiling or the walls or the tabletop, as that thing just kind of gushes out,
Yep, and
gushers are what they call them in the homebrew community.
And you will be an expert with a mop and bucket before it's over with. So the last thing I want to say about this whole pasteurizing pressure bottle bomb thing is, now I haven't done it here at the house, but this is purely what, after reading some of the examples people have given in their own homes, this stuff is like shrapnel, okay? If you're standing near, your kids are standing near it, this stuff is like a grenade going off, okay? This glass shrapnel goes everywhere. So you want to be very, very careful. And that's the final word on that. Hey, next one up. Mixing batches to restart the fermentation. I started I guess it's 2 times. Okay, so he started 2 5-liter batches. Is that what I'm seeing here, Jeff? 2 5-liter batches with the same recipe on the same day, with the same packet of yeast, half each. So half a packet each, I guess. And then both started with a OG of 1.111. And one has ticked along nicely and is now sitting at 1 flat. But the other seems to be to only have reached 1.040. Boy, that's a long ways off. I was thinking maybe I could rack both into a single large fermenter, or is that a crazy idea? I figured the healthy fermentation, Ryan, in one batch would get to work on the remaining sugar in the other. What do you think?
I might be having deja vu. Because I feel like we might have addressed this one a couple weeks ago.
You think? I don't know.
If either I read it and we didn't do it, so it's in my mind, or we did do it, but anyway, go ahead. It's the same batch, it's the same, no problem. Get the put some of the good stuff, going in the batch that didn't. I'd be more interested in finding out why one stalled out like it did and the other did not. That's where I would try to spend my time. Jeff, any ideas that you have playing fermentation detective here?
Yeah, no, well, and I know this was on last week's docket of stuff to hit, so I've tried to review and made sure we didn't hit this one, so that
we may have well talked
about
it. I have no idea, but I got an excuse. I'm a lot older than the both of you, so.
Anyway, regarding the question, why did it stall out like that? And there are a number of different things that make me say, well, it stalled because of X or it stalled because of Y or whatever. We don't have a lot of information as to nutrient schedule or degassing or stuff like that. I know that when I started doing like the Kostna and degassing like every day for the first week, 2 or 3 times a day, that was a game changer for me in terms of stall outs, because I went from probably 1 in 3 batches stalling to none stalling consistently. And I think honestly degassing was the game changer there. Mm-hmm. That said, it could be buildup of carbon dioxide that degassing didn't take care of. It could be that half of that yeast packet wasn't actually half of that yeast packet. It was maybe 2/3 in one and 1/3 in the other. The other one just didn't have that strong of a colony. I would think in a day or two the difference would have been nominal, but speculation on my part. I'd be willing to say, yeah, why not try it? Worst case scenario, if it doesn't pick back up, what you've created is 10 liters of a 1020 mead that you probably don't have to back sweeten very much. So it's still a win.
Am I like old enough? Like if you took both your ages and added them together, am I like that old?
No. Yeah, I'm kind of old fart. I don't know about Ryan.
You're not. No. Okay, hey, last one for the night, guys, and we'll save the rest for next week. This one actually, I think it comes from the Reddit side of the house, Jeff. All the way down to the bottom, talking about wood mead. Go ahead and give it a
this
shot.
is from user 48 volt Mike, MIC. Wood mead. This may seem odd, but I was wondering if it would be possible to extract sugars from wood. Would boiling the wood do that? I kind of want to try to make a mead out of it. Edit. Yes, I know mead is made with honey. I meant it as an additional fermentable sugar.
Lots of wood. Lots and lots and lots of wood. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, like you said, I think it would take quite a bit of wood to make an appreciable amount of sugar. I know you and I have talked about the 5-gallon buckets and how they may have some residual sugar in the wood or some sugar in the wood.
The barrels, 5-gallon barrels, yeah.
Yeah, because I've had that experience too. Like you get a barrel going, and God, I swear, the first time I got my little bourbon barrel going, for love or money, I could not keep it sealed. It was like just dribbling out one seam or another, a couple different places, and I finally had to put an airlock on it, and it was bubbling. So I do think that the yeast that was still active in that secondary fermentation got into the wood and said, "Hey, well, there's a little sugar here."
Oh yeah. Down. Yep, absolutely. I've read where that actually happens. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it was just the pressure building up without that release from the airlock that was causing me to bust the seams, so to speak. I mean, that said, there's...
Yeah, does that little bit of fermentation actually add that much more sugar? I don't think so.
No.
That's just enough.
Let's look back at history. We've got wine, we've got mead, we've got beer, we've got whiskey, we've got all these different alcoholic drinks.
Mhm.
I think by the 21st century, if we could get enough sugar out of something to make alcohol with it,
We
without
would.
putting way too much effort into it, yeah, we would have figured this out by now.
My God,
Humans are nothing but an industrious little organism. So
Ryan, in the last 1,000 years, have we, like Jeff says, have we just pushed the envelope to figure out how we can get alcohol out of just about anything that exists? I mean, have we become so dependent upon alcohol as a society that we try to ferment everything that we can find?
Well, you bring up an interesting point about being about history and being a student of history. People, beer brewers, mead makers, whatever, they all sort of push the envelope and do things that
Yep.
they think are new or interesting and that kind of a thing. And somebody was saying, "Oh, I'm making 100% oat malt beer. Isn't that going to be cool to do that? And I don't think I don't know if they said, I don't think anybody's ever done this or never seen one or that kind of thing. It's like, well, study history, and read into history. There were 100% oat malt beers made back in England in the 1800s, and they just weren't as good as barley beers. So they decided that oat would be an adjunct that they'd use if they wanted to see the quality.
Go
But
back
there
to
was no
barley
need to make 100% oat beer. So I mean, as you think about these things, you've got, thousands of years of recorded history, that you can look back on.
Yeah.
Anything you can think of, somebody else has probably written exhaustively about.
When I see somebody post up in some forum somewhere where they figured out how to ferment their neighbor's old socks, I'm hanging it up, guys. That'll be the end of it for me. Hey, we're gonna wrap it. We'll go ahead.
Well, let me just kind of keep going down that trail there for a while. Because I was just going to say that again. Now, it's good to be a student of history, read history, and brewing or frankly anything else in the world. Make sure you understand what the context of it. And so, like I said, like with oat beers, people try them. They just think barley beers are better. Now with wood, where does wood? Think about where most of the sugar in wood is. Well, it's in the sap.
The sap, yeah.
And there are even recent experiments of people who have made. Now I don't know about mead, but I know beer. Who made beer using sap as the liquid, 100% liquid. And I remember the one experiment. These people went out and they tapped a maple tree, I think, and collected 5 gallons or 8 gallons. Well, probably more than 5 gallons because they were going to boil it, but maybe 7-8 gallons of maple sap. And then use that as their liquid, and they did their boil, their sparge, or mash and sparge and boil and all that stuff. And they said that after they brewed the beer, and basically all it did was add like a couple of gravity points. Sap is very low gravity. It's like boil it all day to make syrup.
Right.
But they said there was no maple flavor. There's no flavor at all. And all they got out of it was an extra few days worth of work and a couple more gravity points, and that was it. So you could now, like I've done, if you want for the flavors and the sugars that come from a tree, use pine. You can use like spruce tips. I should say spruce or pine. So spruce tips are very common. They have a lot of sugars and some more flavors and some of that. Or green pine cones from pine trees. So I'm talking about actual pine trees. So white pine, black pine, things like that. And those pine cones also have, when they're green, have some really good flavor to them. And you can use those. So, I mean, there's a lot of parts of a tree you can use. You can use the mature wood that's been, cured and toasted and killed and everything else to get you those flavors. You can use the spruce tips. You can use the pine cones. You can use, I think, like birch leaves. I think I've seen out there as an adjunct, or things like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can use trees to bring in some of that tree flavor. But as far as the sugars, like I said, even if 100% of the liquid that you use is from sap, you'd have to essentially make a syrup to have enough to actually have any sort of a flavor left over after you're doing it. And I tell you, do that once and let us know what you think.
There you go. And we'll end it right there. And I'll tell you what, if you haven't been entertained here at the Mead House, you probably should go watch reruns of I Love Lucy. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. And special thanks to Adam Tom. Dude, you need to stay in touch with us because you're on the cusp. Would like to hear more about what you're doing. Second place Iron V winner this year in 2020. Thanks for hanging out with us in this episode. And don't forget, let us know what you're brewing. You can email us, info@themeadhouse.com. Send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, both at The Mead House. You can also message us on Patreon. So all of our key holders out there, be thinking of questions that you want to be asking some of our guests. We'll try to give you a heads up and let you know when that starts and who's going to be on so that you get those questions in. That's for our key holders out there. But in the meantime, hey, happy mead making. That's it for this episode. Hey, Ryan, flip the lights off, and Jeff, slam the door shut and bar the door. We'll be back next week with episode number 173 of The Mead House. We're gone.